Hey guys, so I got this. It's a 1/4 inch. It's 2 inches by 1 inch. And what I've done is I've opened up the hole in the fiberglass so that this will fit in there, right? And this will fit in here. So I did not go through and through. I still have the original hole in the bottom. And what I want to do is this is 10 gauge in thickness. This barrel depth gives me plenty of threads, right? It's threaded all the way up. This sets just under the surface. And so I'm making a piece, a band, if you will, or a strip that will fall into this hole, will sandwich the fender in between this panel and the mount, and lock it down. Now, because these are fiberglass fenders, you see how thick that is? Well, this wasn't. You can see up at the top here. So I built it up. I can turn this. This vice grip is set to the same thickness. Basically, I pulled the level across this point here on the surface of the fender to this point here on the surface of the fender, because this car is still level, the body is level, all, you know, so on and so forth. And I checked there, and at the here, it's easier to see at the bottom of the bracket here, until I made sure that my fenders were clocked, the setback and all that I've measured from the frame back. You know, there's a couple of different areas. There is some work to do on here. This side, because of a little bit of, I haven't hammered on this, but this has got a little bit of a bubble at the point where this hits. Well, you can see I made a little pen mark. So I got to tap on that in that direction, and I think I got to tap, well, I know I have to tap in here and start to bring some of this out. It's not a lot, but once I get that band built, I'll build it in 2 halves so I can build mirrors, and that's going to start to tell me where I need to go. But that band sets on top of this pan. I cut the pan in this profile, knowing that, you know, more than likely I'll have to take some material out. I don't need to go 1/4 of an inch there. The deltas, maybe if I go 1/4 of an inch there, I'll need to come out, I don't know, maybe not 1/4 of an inch. And that's going to take that panel and turn it just a little bit that way. And that's what I'm finding in the panel. So I'm letting that set up. Just rolled a bunch of masking tape over the fender, established my height, my location, and then just slowly to get the thickness on the fiberglass. I got six layers in there that I'm just kind of slightly crushing, if you want to call it that. So back to this then. So I'm just going to rip this in half, and I made the one up. Just take a piece of 1 inch strap, and then I'm welding top and bottom. I just finished this, so ouch. Basically weld both sides, and then I'll grind her down into a strip. Channeled it. It's got a curve. It's got a very slight curve on it because that follows the fender. Because it follows the rear fender, there's a slight in the pan across the fender that you can maybe kind of see in there. And that one is a bit more dramatic than this one. And it's just how stuff comes out of the mold, but I like the feature, right? It'll add a little integrity across that pan before she kicks and goes down. So I may have to build this up just a little bit with fiberglass, with mud. The other thing is, this span is like about 1.75 inches, maybe closer to 2 7/8 inches, and this is narrower. Visually, I can just, if I look at that and look at that, it's wider, and a lot of it has to do with it's very thick in this area. Again, how it came out of the mold, but this needs to be blocked into here. So, and the last thing is on this fender, there's that wow, and I might have showed this in a video, a little bit of wow, and that's got to come out. Once I get this all kind of built out, then I'm going to go back and, just like the bodywork on the car, I'm going to go back and, okay, I established my final nesting point, then I'm going to pull that wow out with fiberglass. Probably have to do a slit, push him out, something like that, and get that straightened out. This one site's just wonderful. Everything site's wonderful. I mean, there's, this little tiny section here. Most of that'll just block out when I block out the bead in here. It might need a little bit in here, but that'll block out. So, we're pushing along. Hey guys. This might seem like not a lot of progress, but from the last video to this video has been 2 days. And in the last video we were working our way down. We did have a low spot in the center, and we still do. It's right here. You can kind of see the shadow right here. And I'll get to that. That's because, I had a lot of damage here. I continue to tink on here to get this up and as close as I possibly can get. And it is dialed really good. This here and this weld seam. When I welded that T in, of course, that moved all that metal. But now there's a hint of the weld. Most of the other weld is, again, just a hint. Look at the weld seam across the bottom. I'm touching, I filed and shrank and filed and shrank and shrank and shrank and shrank. Now this bottom apron, it follows the original floor on the bottom. But again, with all of this, it was moving. With all of the welding, it was moving. So I focused on this side. I like the profile on this side. I can run my straight edge down, and I have minimal gap. Got some opportunities, but my area of concentration is this. So I'm building, the perimeter, if you will, and getting this down to the minimum amount of low spots that I can tap. As it sits right now, there is no more than 1/8 of an inch running my straight 36-inch straight edge on 18 along that center line, putting my finger in the hole and holding my thumb on number 6 on both sides. Okay? And why am I doing number 6? Because the radius changes. It's tighter here and there. And as I stay on number 6 all the way down, I look for opportunities where I have to move my thumb in or out. I did that wrong. In or out. And if I have to move out, there's a high spot in the region nearest the end on one side or the other. If I have to move my thumb in and out progressively on both sides to the same dimension, then if I have to move it out, this area starts to flatten. If I have to move it out, this area starts to round. If I have to move it in, this area starts to flatten. So I just basically worked and worked and worked until I could come up with a profile. Now, between the hint of that black mark there and there, this flattened. So starting a couple hours ago, I started progressively moving that and moving that and moving that, and then coming up here and checking and seeing if I'm moving in this area, am I pushing this out, and then shrinking that, and then coming down and moving and moving and moving. And from the inside, just putting a dolly down in there and a 2x4 and just leveraging, tap, 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 leverage, 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 and progressively moving about 2 inches at a time across the panel, and then working back and forth. Anyway, so I got it. Now I had to come into the panel because I traced the profile, and I had to come in and dolly that same area that I have marked there. I had to dolly it down, keep dollying it down, and now I've got a very, very nice radius. Now, one would say it's all visual. It's all visual. Well, in the end, it's visual too. But my old marks, 8 1/4 inches, 10 inches in from the edge. So I did 5, 10, 15, 20 inches in. 5, 10, 15, 20 inches in. And so I measured. I identified a mark on the fender by measuring up from the bottom of the fender up to here on both sides. It's long been wiped off. Excuse me. And then I drew a line across there and then measured. And this is an old, but 8 1/4 inches here, 8 here, 7 7/8, 7 7/8, 8 and 8. So I progressively worked the panel. I haven't measured now, but I'm very confident that I'm going to be in there. I mean, if I go from 8 to 8 1/8, I'm pretty happy. Okay, if I can go that span, maintain 1/8 of an inch gap, when this panel's done, it'll be right where I need it. However, if I can get whatever, 8's a smaller number, and 8, and that's going to shrink now. Those are going to shrink, and if they shrink in, you can see where I ended here, but I started almost 2 lines over, and 1 3/4 lines here. So you can see that I probably shifted it. Well, I know I shifted it a little bit. So now I'll go back and I'll measure again. I know I'm kind of out there here a little bit. Measure again and continue to try to dial that in. So for my straight edge, my distance will just progressively push the panel back. And conversely, I probably need to tap the body a little bit there. So this is my baseline. I'm working my way that way by adjusting the body to fit the panel. That is probably as confusing as it can get, but more than anything, I'm just trying to establish symmetry across the panel by slowly working in. And it appears to me that I'm working to accomplish that, and the results are coming. When you're down to 1/8 of an inch, I mean, you know you can move that metal without doing substantial damage to the car. So, thanks, guys. Well, today is the day that I'm fashioning up a bumper. I just filed any overhang of the welds off of each end right now. I just finished it, still hot. But I welded in 3 nuts, a 7/16 on the top, 7/16 on the bottom, and a 3/8 on the side. I had to relieve a little bit of the 3/8 so the 7/16 didn't interfere with it. So basically I took some 10 gauge and formed it to 1.5 OD, 1 3/4, pardon me, 1 3/4 OD, so it would fit inside of the frame. The frame's 11 gauge with 1.5 inches. These are the original bumper mounts. There was a casting that went in here, and I'm sliding into there, and I'm grabbing those 3 holes. One is the fender, the rear fender mount. This pad, I don't know if I had that in a video, but these pads, yeah, I think I did. But those 2 pads then will be plug welded onto the rear pan that goes across. I made these up today, just formed them and then welded it together, gauging them in here so I can lay a straight edge across the whole thing. And when these are bolted down, then They're the center support for the pan. Got everything ready to go. Just finished, I built those parts out, welded them up in the chassis, and then cut that piece of tubing to go in between those two, and then that piece will then just slip in and bolt on. And my bumper will be hidden behind that radius there then. So I still don't know if I'm going to take off of that for additional fender support, but these fenders are beefy. Just because of the structure and the shape, they're quite beefy. And I'd like as much room under there, because where the exhaust ends, you can kind of see the exhaust right there where it ends. I'm almost thinking I may need to get a resonator or something in there, if I can fit it, tuck it up there, if I can fit it behind the tires and tuck something up there. I still don't know how my exhaust is going to come out, if I'm going to do something fancy on the back. More than likely we'll do something fancy on the back, but I'm still far from that. So anyway, I got most of this dinged out. I need to make that molding strip around there, but that pan needs to go in and sit where it's going to sit so that I can start to mock that up and get that welded on. So it's going very, very well. Just a lot of little trinkets, kind of boring. I mean, doesn't take a lot to build this stuff. It's just a lot of goofing around. And of course, 1 3/4 square tubing cut up would suffice, but I had 10 gauge. I have a brake that'll break something that small, so I just quick whipped them up. So that's today. Okay, so now we've got the rear pan bead rolled. I don't know how much video I have, but when we rolled the back, we tried to roll it by hand by clamping a 2-inch tube, not that one. Now that's 1.5 inches, but a 2-inch tube, a piece of angle on the top, and then we tried to hand form it down. As would be expected, we shined light down on it, and it had a little crown on it. So what we did was I took it over to a friend of mine with a brake, and the corners were good and tight. Turns out he has a 2-inch die, so I'm going to have him push that down. I just don't have a 4-foot brake. I'm trying to get one, but I don't have it. I have that, which is 20 inches. So I'm going to have him clean up that 2-inch, and then tuck the bottom. And at this point then, now I'm cutting a profile for around the fender. Get in back here. Just getting my paper pattern ready that will follow the bottom of the pan. Okay. And it'll be a 3-inch, or 2 3/4 actually, it turns out, because I don't want to get too high up here. I got to grab that fender radius right there and keep it looking cute. So I was thinking 4 inches, but I think 4 inches is just going to get me too high up on the fender the way it sits here. I'll go back to the other side. And I'll take a look at it, but that profile to me seems to look pretty good. This is where it'll blend right in with the bead right here. That's the bead that follows around the fender. So kind of gentle. I could, clearly I could go up another, 2 inches. Strike that. I don't think it will look right. Apologize. Anyway, we're getting there. So now I'll trim that pattern, throw it on a piece of stock, and it looks like when I take it off, it's, you know, there's not a lot straight in that distance, so I'll have to use my tipping die, because even though it's relatively straight across here, you know, it's following that body, and I can get straight, but, you know, probably about 70-80% of the way there, then she starts to tip up, because that is a compound curve, right? So I'm well past my center line. So then I'll make it out of 2 pieces, and then I'll TIG her in the middle, and then TIG it to the body. But that's where I'm at right now, just getting ready. So I got my trusty, you know, drill operated bead roller, my homemade tipping die, my industrial wheel bonded to the tube with Gorilla Glue, and I'm beginning to roll that rear piece. So now let's get this, get this stuck in there. So basically what I did, you know, I did the paper template. I marked one piece. Okay, I put a 1-inch, not really waste, I have to cut it down, but a 1-inch area on each side, and then carefully scribed that on. Excuse me. I taped this on, and then I used a compass to make a line all the way around. Cut out that piece, used that piece as a template for the next piece, and then mirrored the same and worked my way from the outside in by measuring. Then before I started bending it, I clamped the 2 pieces together and cleaned the sides so that I'd have 2 identical pieces. And then the lines are gone now because of the beading over the top of them, and you can see, I mean, there's nothing that's certainly perfect. The field is really good. As I was bowing it, you know, I've got a crown on this piece, but it's a consistent crown all the way down, and then it starts to bury in this neighborhood because, you know, of the narrowing. I'm slowly shrinking and stretching as I come around the corner to try to just bend it, you know, keep it relatively flat with the table. That's my goal, is to keep it relatively flat. See, I can come in here and where you can see where there's a little tension in there, I could shrink that just a little bit. Where there's no tension would be on the other side, and I've been just stretching it just to straighten the panel out, right? So I'll keep on going. The end result is this will have to be rounded to follow this bead, to follow that bead. So it'll, right at this point here is where it starts to tie into that bead, and that bead starts to sweep around. On the bottom, it'll be rounded around the fender, and I'll probably tighten the radius up. I looked at some pictures of these of the 33, because that's what the fenders are off of. The 30 is completely different. That had that pan on it, and just from a simple video, you almost have to go out and look at the difference between the rear end of a 30 and a 30, you know, 30, 31, and a 33. So, and this doesn't even mirror a 33, because you're not going to see fasteners and all that kind of goofy stuff. It's going to follow the body. It's going to tie in. It's going to be integrated where the fasteners are hidden, and this surface here will be flush across where it does some other funky things to accommodate the rear bumper mounts. There's a big slot in the pan, but I'm hiding the bumper on this. So we are making progress. I'm going slow. I'm following the line, and eventually I'll get it out. And you can see, you know, where the bead is and how it's, you know, moving around a little bit on the edge. Big deal, because the whole thing will have to be dollied anyway. But I'm making progress. I'm comfortable with it so far, and I think we're going to get some results. Alrighty, you got the obviously the beads rolled. Got the edges down. It's all rough right now on both of them. Nothing perfectly flat yet, but profile-wise, you know, I got some twist here, but my profile, been very conscious of that being, excuse me, a mirror image of the other one. So now, if you remember, we left an inch on this edge on both sides, and we're beginning at 1/4 of an inch, and this is actually going to be formed around the back side of the car. So this will drift to 0. Let me think. It all depends on how I connect it over there, but basically this will be a half ellipse, not a half round, with a 1 inch wide diameter on this side by 1/4 of an inch tall. It'll tie into the bead, and the bead will then float down here. Now, when I rolled it as a radius. So, in that sense, it keeps a profile, if you will. And then as this transitions, it makes that transition easier to go to the round bead on the fender. And then the bottom, the same thing. So it's going to have a bit of a shadow line on where the pan comes in underneath the bottom. You know, there will be, I don't know how to, there will be a shadow line because it's not a tight bend. Now I'm looking at some pictures and stuff, just making sure I'm keeping my head screwed on straight. There is a relatively large rubber welting that it was a standard size welting that came down into here, and it appeared to get really significant here, like somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/4 of an inch gap. So that piece of welting that connected to the welting that went around the fender, you know, to fill that seam, it just transitioned here and got wider as it went around on the 33. Of course, I'm going to tighten it up. It's going to look a little, not exactly like a 33. It's going to look different than that. But at this point, I like that radius. I'm going to stay with it. And I chose to, you know, I just stepped my die. I just stepped it out on either side as I was bead rolling, and tried to follow the line as I was on maybe 1/8 of an inch on either side of the line. There you can kind of see as I move this. There's a third line on the inside. So anyway, I got a terrible cold today, and I apologize for that. So now the point is that I'm going to have to trim this. I think I'm going to creep up on it, right? But probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch now. I'm going to trim that, which will take a lot of my body work, you know, down to here, and start to clean up, you know, where the hammer forming is. And it, of course, gets easier and easier and easier to hammer form. Once I get the half profile, once I get that curve and the fitment, the curve the same and the fitment like it needs to be on the fenders, then I got to get the radius in here, find the halfway point, the optimum point in each one of these to mate them, and then weld it together. So this is a relatively long journey to get there, but I'm happy with the results so far. All right, so I moved my shrinker and stretcher over to this post that had that godforsaken anvil on it. Anyway, shrinker, stretcher. Yeah, I still have a cold. I always have a cold. Anyway, so I'm just going in and trying to copy the profile. That's on the driver's side there, and this is on the passenger. The way I'm starting is I'm just going to basically mirror this one. I like this side better than that side. This has a little bit of see, there's a little bit of work to do right in here, and I can bring it out to the piece when I get to that point. So it's sitting on, remember the pan sits on here, this pan sits on here, and this is, I'm just trying to creep up on this corner. So just making marks and deciding where I want to touch, or hit, if you will. And now this body, where I'm touching the body, right in this area right here, I need to start shrinking. Then it'll start touching over, and I'm going to progressively shrink. Now, I don't want to just shrink it right here, just pull it together right there, because I'll create a wow in this thing. I don't know if anybody knows what a wow is. That's when you go to the show and see a really nice car, and you look at an imperfection and go, wow. Okay, so I don't want to do that. So I'll have to just step, minor shrinks on both sides. And typically the way I do that is I'll mark even increments, and in between those increments, then I'll say I'm going to hit it 3 times or 4 times or that kind of thing. And then as I'm moving, not 3 times in one spot, and then just keep moving and keep moving. You can see from the center line that clearly I've left a considerable amount of material, and that's obviously, I just sheared the sheet, cut the pieces, and when I made that my paper shape, I just ran it plenty long. Up in here, okay, I clearly overshrank right here. I create a reference point. That's where I'm going to work off of. This should, as this cleans up, this should push a little bit of excess material up there, and then I'll just continue to, I'll have to stretch this area and just shrink it closer until it comes in and follows the body. So we are making progress. I do have right here, I have a low spot. You can just see from the sanding, right? So I'm going, not obviously not going to try to follow that low spot, but that should expose itself as I'm going across from here and starting to touch around the corner. The other complexity is, you got to do the same thing on the inside. Oh my. I mean, a little bit over, but. So this all has to go in and run at a bit of an angle. So I've got a ways to go, but it is coming. I mean, when you get to the point where, okay, I can't achieve the shape, that material will move that much from a straight to going around a tight corner, you're not going to have a holy shyster moment. You're going to start to get some confidence in what you're doing. And it really isn't that difficult. It really isn't. Once you get started, so long as it's not difficult, but you follow your discipline, and that is, I'm consistently doing both pieces. Now, that one's not identical to this one at this moment, but I'm close, right? And as long as I stay within the realm of close, meaning I can bump it for, a minute, 90 seconds and get it in, then you're there. But if I left that other piece flat and said, okay, I'm going to follow this profile, you can get there too, but you're just checking so many times. It's nice to kind of do a couple, 3, 4 checks. Okay, stop. Start to form your masterpiece, if you want to call it that. Go back, shrink the other one to the profile, and you're always keeping it close because you're cognizant of how you got, that particular radius or with this sharp to drift out to a very wide, and this one, an extremely wide bend. So, that's my advice, and it seems to work for me. It's worked for me on several other parts of this body over the course of time. So, we'll go from there. Okay, continuing to work. And now I've got, this eventually needs to go down to the bead. I should mention, I took a caliper and ran it across the tops of this side of the bead and set it a 1/2 inch in this case and ripped both sides. Now I cut it with a cutoff wheel, and it's not perfect, but I know my nominal is a 1/2 inch all the way down. So long as I'm touching, then I can finesse it later. Meaning it was a 1/2 inch, it needs to get down to a 1/4 inch, right? I need to rip half that distance off of there. This is more squared than the bead, and I'll have to do some metal forming on there. But I'm copying the profile of the fender onto the metal, and then doing a swoop. You can see there's a little bit of gap here that will settle out as I form this into a curve, and you know, I'll weld it onto here. And this, of course, this will be a little more gentle as I remove material here and form that onto that curve. And then it'll wrap into this, which right now is following. You know, I'm bending and bending, and I copied this profile, and then all of a sudden, whoo, I got a very close hit. I got a low spot here on the body, but I'm touching here and here. So now, because this touched, I was working this side in a manner of speaking, to get to this curve. Now I'm here, and I'm going to go back and continue to work this. This is a lot of hits in this area, but I'll mark where it's touching. That's what's about right there, and gently hit, and maybe even have to stretch this, I don't know, but hit and come around until I'm touching all over again. So I am getting very, very, very close. The only other thing that I observed is I'm coming above the line, I'm drifting down to it. What does that tell me? That tells me I need to do some of my shrinking on the top to bring that top in. Well, you can kind of see you can kind of see it fan out, but I'll bring reduce this material, which will pull it in, and I'll have to play with shrink and stretch to get the profile, but yet to bring that down. I'll need to shrink in this corner here. That'll pull it down too. There's probably, and there's a gap here, so I'll need to shrink in this corner here to continue to clock it, and continue to go until if you think about a lever, if I take material out of here, it's going to pull it down. I can pull it in and just continue to work it until it fits. It's not that I haven't made 47 mistakes by going the wrong direction, stretching where I should be shrinking, all that kind of thing. It's that I'm just staying with it, learning as I go, obviously. Whoops, sorry. Learning as I go, and getting her dialed in. But I'm so close to being there now. Both the other side looks like this one, with the exception to that. I'll probably go to work on that first, right? Test fit it, and then continue on. Well, my hands hurt, but I am making progress. You know, that's out. Pushing that in sends that out. And that guy's in, pushing that out. So I concentrate again, continue on there. Eventually get to the point through that. Won't need the magnets, you know. But we're almost making it happen. Time for me to head to work, but hey, progress.